Next from Springfield, we attend a press conference as a group of bipartisan legislators express their support for keeping Illinois coal as part of the state's energy plan. This runs about 25 minutes.
All right, good morning to everybody. Good to see everybody here this morning. 2 weeks ago, a bipartisan group of downstate lawmakers gathered here in the press room to reiterate our support for Illinois coal moving forward this session with any legislation that deals with energy production in the state of Illinois. So we wanted to gather again this week to just reiterate the points that we made 2 weeks ago, relevant points to the conversation, starting with unemployment in downstate counties. So we brought a graphic. You can see here very plainly that there's a correlation between unemployment in downstate counties along with locations of coal mines. And this is something that has been prevalent for a couple of decades in the state. We'll provide you with some statistics that back this up. But the good news is we have what we think is a workable solution moving forward to utilize our resources and our strengths as a state, particularly in downstate, to tackle unemployment, starting with coal. So let me read a few things that supports our concept and what we're working toward in legislation, and then I'll invite Representative Bradley and the others up to make a few remarks. First of all, in many instances, in almost every instance actually in the state, coal mines are less than 50 miles from power plants or from generation facilities. That's a fact. Illinois coal has a 22% higher energy density than Western coal. So our coal burns hotter, produces more energy than its competitor in Western states. In 1990, utilities bought 61% of their coal from Illinois mines, which employed about 10,000 workers. That was in 1990. By 2010, 20 years later, plants in Illinois burned just 9.7% Illinois coal and employed 3,500 workers. So in 20 years, the generators went from using 61% Illinois coal down to less than 10%. Current statewide employment sits around 4,300 coal miners. So that's a statewide perspective. To me, the most important point of all of those, and those things come from DCEO, those figures, is that in nearly every case, a generation facility is less than 50 miles from a coal production mine. So let me focus specifically now for the remainder of my comments on Montgomery County, which is right here. Montgomery County, I have the privilege of serving at the county and the state senate along with Representative Bourne. And Montgomery County historically has a much higher than average rate of unemployment in the state of Illinois. It's typically 2 to 3 points higher. During the height of the recession, in some cases it was almost double other parts of the state, the unemployment. So Montgomery County has an incredible number of challenges that are very deep discussions on how to deal with it. But for certain, one thing that we can do is promote the use of coal that can be mined, that's being mined today in Montgomery County. So a couple of things that are relevant to the discussion specific to Montgomery County and the Coffeen Power Plant. The Montgomery County coal mined in Hillsborough can deliver coal to the Coffeen Power Plant at a 55% savings per million BTU delivered in a price. So it burns hotter, it's less distance. It's actually about 6 miles away from the power plant in Coffeen. Illinois coal and the coal in Hillsborough has 4% less CO2 emissions than Powder River Basin or Western state coal. Using this concept just in Coffeen, that would produce an extra $1.5 million in revenue to the state that obviously we need during difficult budget times. Being only 5 miles away, 6 miles, we had a disagreement about this morning, but let's say 6 miles. If you hauled all of the coal from the mine in Montgomery County to the Coffeen Power Plant, the miles traveled for a year's worth of consumption would be less than one trip from the Powder River Basin to Coffeen. So you could move coal for 365 days, and that would be less miles traveled than a single trip of coal from the western states, which is where the coal is coming from today in Coffeen. So I pull out Montgomery County and Coffeen to reiterate what we brought forward 2 weeks ago, because to me, it's an example of how we can do things better in Illinois to support employment in Illinois, to support revenue generated in Illinois, in a place that is in desperate need of good-paying jobs. We believe that moving forward in energy conversations and energy legislation conversations this spring, that this should be part of any conversation advanced in legislation. We can use our resources to employ miners in Montgomery County instead of miners in western states. At the same time, we can make sure that all of the Clean Air Act regulations that have come and that are coming can be implemented during the course of this discussion. We believe that there's a way to do that, and we believe that now is the time to do it in the state of Illinois. And I would close with this. I would use CWLP as an example here in Springfield. CWLP has been a leader in scrubbing, not just in the state of Illinois, but across the country. CWLP uses exclusively Illinois coal. To my knowledge, there isn't any other coal brought to be burned by CWLP here by the city of Springfield other than coal mined in the state of Illinois. That's a model that can be used in a part of the state that is in desperate need of good-paying jobs, and we believe that should be part of the conversation moving forward. Representative Bradley.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'd like to thank Representatives Davidsmeyer and Bourne, Costello, Senator McCann, and of course Senator Menard for calling this press conference. We are continuing our discussion, our demands, our statements that Illinois coal has to be part of the discussion. That when we do an energy policy and an energy bill in the state of Illinois, that coal has to be part of it. It's incredible to me. How in the world do you get a situation where you have coal that burns 22% hotter, puts 22% less CO2 into the atmosphere, on actual burn coal puts 4% less CO2 into the atmosphere? And how in the world can you have a coal mine sitting 6 miles from a power plant which has the ability to burn that coal that's being burned in Ohio, coal that's being burned in many other states, coal that's being burned throughout the world? And how in the world do you have a coal mine sitting 6 miles from a place that can burn it, and they're shipping in Western coal? Because we allow them to charge us to transport that coal here. Illinois citizens are paying to have that coal shipped to Illinois. That's wrong. And so we talked in general terms last week, and now we're talking in specific terms about a clear example, a specific example of what's wrong with the system we have. We understand why we had it, we understand how it came about, but we don't understand why we continue to have it. So as we continue these discussions, what is important to note is that the downstate caucuses, in particular, members of the downstate caucuses, all represented here today, continue to be persistent in our calls for coal to be part of this discussion. Burning Illinois coal, it will be as cheap or cheaper for consumers, it will create jobs, and it will reduce our carbon footprint. It's the right thing to do, put Illinois people to work and burn Illinois coal. So I appreciate you all being here today. I appreciate fellow members, and I'd open it up for anyone else that would like to offer comments.
I just wanted to reiterate the fact that we're here just to make sure that coal is part of this entire conversation about the entire overall energy discussion. When we talk about this, we have to make sure that we understand that Illinois coal is currently being excluded, not because of simply a business decision, but because of past decisions by bodies like the ICC and whatnot, to recover the cost of actually putting in some of these scrubbers. So past decisions and not being allowed to pass along those costs to invest in the future, which is lower CO2 emissions, lower costs to consumers. have had an effect on where we are today. This is an opportunity for us to work with the generators, to work with the local Illinois coal miners, to make sure that jobs are being created right here, that it is the best business decision, and that we're doing what's right for the environment, what's right for consumers of energy. And the reality is we are a net exporter of energy. And coal is a huge part of that. And we want to continue to be a net exporter. We want those jobs right here. We don't want to have to buy energy from Indiana, who's burning all Indiana coal, right? We want that right here. So that's what we're looking at. We're working with everybody involved to make sure that everybody can come to the table and come up with the best solution to make sure that we create those jobs right here. Thank you.
Anything else? No. I'd be happy to take any questions, or Sam, you want to say?
No, I want to say, I think Senator Menard, and I think all speakers hit on it, but I think not only does it create jobs, but it creates great paying jobs with benefits. It's the kind of jobs that it creates. The coal mining industry provides the best conduit, the best entry for someone to go straight to the middle class. And so it makes, again, it makes all the sense in the world, whether on the generation side, whether on the consumption side, on the consumer side. It makes sense to burn Illinois coal in Illinois. I mean, it's common sense, and we want to make sure that this is injected into the conversation as we start talking about overarching energy policy as we move forward in the General Assembly.
I'd be happy to take any questions if they're.
Other than news releases, are you talking with Representative Neckrits or Representative Walsh on some of their energy bills, or where are you going?
Yeah, I think, as we stated 2 weeks ago, well, let me rewind the clock. Many of the things that we've outlined in the past couple weeks are seeking to start a conversation that began in 1990 with the Clean Air Act. So there were reasons, as Representative Bradley stated, why things happened the way that they did. But it's now 2015, and we want to have this conversation because we believe that the technology exists today, and the resources exist today, and the unemployment exists today to the extent that it does, in a fashion that deserves this conversation, frankly, by the legislature, whether it's from members who represent areas of downstate or those that don't. So what we're saying again today is we're working on specific legislation, which we will have, but at a minimum, we need to be part of the conversation moving forward, whether it's any of the several bills that have been introduced and that are making their way through the legislative process this spring.
If I remember the history of old stories, we always talked about Western coal as low sulfur and Illinois as high sulfur. Has that changed, or is the technology better? I mean, what is different now that makes it, reasonable to, you get the sulfur out somehow?
Yeah, I would say the technology is different, Bernie, and that's a clear difference from 1990, which is why I cited CWLP as an example. CWLP burns exclusively Illinois coal, to my knowledge.
Other plants up to speed on that, or would they have
The
to
regs have
adapt?
caught up too.
Yeah.
Southern Illinois coal is not singled out anymore.
Yeah. So I think this calls for rebalancing of what was set into motion in 1990, because regardless of what has happened, regardless of the reasons why things happen the way that they have, we're saying today, let's have a rebalancing of this conversation. Let's use the resource that we have to attack a problem that is apparent to everyone when it comes to unemployment, and why not use the resources we have to employ people from the state? Do you want to add something?
Did I understand Representative Bradley and Davis Meyer say that the generators can pass along the cost of importing the Western coal,
Correct.
but can't pass along the cost of scrubbers?
I don't know about the cost of scrubbers. They haven't that I know of, but certainly the transportation costs are allowed. It originally began with the fuel adjustment clause, which has now been incorporated into the rate structure. So ratepayers in the state of Illinois actually pay to have that coal shipped in from other places. In further response to Bernie's question, the regs have caught up, right? The regs have caught up for all coal has to be scrubbed now. And so there's not a disadvantage to the sulfur coal of Illinois versus the Powder River Basin. There's other stuff in that other coal, and it has to be scrubbed. So what it comes down to are CO2 emissions. Ours puts less CO2 into the air. So if you're scrubbing all coal, why not be burning Illinois coal? The only reason we're not is because we continue to allow the cost of transportation for this garbage coal from other states to be shipped into Illinois. Our coal is better, and we ought to be burning it.
Is that part of your proposal, a specific part that you want to get rid of the fuel adjustment clause?
Yeah, we want to quit having Illinois citizens and ratepayers pay to have coal shipped in from other states that kills our economies and limits our jobs and opportunities. Absolutely. And without getting into the specifics of who, what, when, and where in terms of the negotiations, there are negotiations going on. There are discussions going on, and coal is part of it. And so if there's going to...
Who would be against it?
I don't know. I don't know why anybody would be against it, other than it's a change from the status quo.
Who's in the negotiations?
I'm not going to get into the specifics of who's negotiating what, but there are discussions and negotiations going on, and coal is part of that. And we're going to continue to beat the drum so long as there are discussions and negotiations and so long as there is talk about doing something. We're for clean energy. We're for nuclear energy. We're for a unified and balanced statewide energy program, which includes Illinois coal. That's all we're saying.
You're saying that every generator in Illinois that burns coal has proper scrubbers to be able to burn Illinois?
No, there's two different things. We have some that have scrubbers, and as part of this discussion, as we put forth in the last press conference, we think if we can get rid of some of these transportation costs and shift those to, helping the industry and helping our power plants do additional scrubbers, that we can even increase the ability of Illinois coal-fired plants to burn Illinois coal.
I think our State Department of Commerce has like a coal development office, and I think funding for that is being, does that have anything to do with what you all are talking about, or does that make a difference in your negotiations?
I'm sorry, can you?
The coal development funds that go through the Department of Commerce, I think there's maybe a plan to cut some funding there. I'm not sure on specifics, but does that have anything to do with what you all are talking about?
No, that's a separate issue, and we're also fighting that, but that's a separate issue. This is something which has been on the books for a long time that needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed.
What states is the basin? Is that Wyoming, or where is that?
Powder River Basin is mostly Wyoming.
Anybody on farmland there?
Representative Bradley, how many jobs would this represent to your district if you could get the legislation you wish?
Oh, gosh, when I took office, there were no coal mines operating in my district. There are now 3. So we have seen some of a resurgence. This could even be further development. At one time in the city of West Frankfort, there were 7 operating coal mines within the city limits. That was at the height of the coal days. We don't expect that it'll get back to that point, but we think that a conservative or rational estimate would be as many as 8,000 jobs statewide. And those are good, as Sam McCann said, those are good paying jobs. Those are Illinois jobs. Why are we paying to have this stuff shipped into Illinois?
And to add insult to injury, we have many communities around the state that once were boom towns because of the coal mining industry. And it's not just the jobs in the coal mines, it's the jobs that are created around that, all the support industry around those coal mines. And to add insult to injury, you have laid off coal miners who were planning on retiring with a good pension, and they were planning on their children going to work at a coal mine or a supporting industry who are going to retire with a good pension. And now they're not, because we're getting, as Representative Bradley said, this garbage coal from out west. And when every time they turn their heat up or they turn the light on, here's where the insult comes in. They have to pay in their power bill for their competitor who took their job from the west to ship it in here. It's just wrong. This is not about anything other than, I think as Senator Menard iterated, it's a rebalancing. It might have made sense at the time. We're not saying it did or it didn't. We're saying it's 25 years later. It's a full generation later. We're sent here to be policymakers, and we need to rebalance the policy.
I have 2 questions. First of all, so we had a press conference similar to this a couple of weeks ago. What has changed? Anything? Have any developments?
I used a specific example of caffeine, Amanda.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was to illustrate the point that we put out, for the first time 2 weeks ago. This is undoubtedly complicated. It was complicated when it was, changed in 1990, and it's been complicated ever since. Kurt or somebody asked the question, who would be opposed to that? I couldn't tell you how many times I get that question in my district. When you're talking to people in Hillsborough, coal miners who mine coal and they flip their lights on and they know that power is being generated by coal from, 1,100 miles away. That's a logical question to ask. Why can't we find a way to utilize the resources that we have in the state to employ people in the state in places with high unemployment? Why can't we do that? That's a oversimplified question. It is complicated, but we're just simply saying, let's put that out there for discussion this session. We have all these energy bills going through the process. We're focused on this because it's important not just to downstate, but to the state as a whole. And that should be part of any discussion moving forward.
So I guess what I mean to say, like, in that 2 weeks' time, since people know that this is out there, and I kind of heard this addressed what I was saying, but have you been welcomed into kind of energy negotiations, or what has the reception been from players like, I don't know, Exelon, small little things like that?
I would just say this, we're not going to go away. I mean, we're not going to go away simply because it's hard to do. There's any number of bills going through the process, and we want this to be part of it. We're demanding that this be part of it. If you go back to where I started, in 1990, utilities bought 61% of their coal from Illinois mines. Today, it's less than 10%. And in that time, that's changed. And, if we want to talk about how do we fund the Coal Development Office, let's get more revenue to the state of Illinois to do that. That change alone in caffeine would produce an extra $1.5 million for the state treasury. Just that one change.
How much would it cost to equip it with proper scrubber?
It's equipped now.
Okay, so caffeine is, not
Yeah.
all of them are.
No, correct.
Has anybody, surely CWLP has some economic model that says we spent this much
Yeah.
on scrubbers and we made it up in this many years
Yep.
by buying Illinois coal?
Yeah, we have those models as well. And I think we shouldn't forget the point that sooner or later, the most advanced scrubbers are going to have to be equipped on every generation facility in the state. That's coming. We know it's coming. So we also want to get a head start on that, and we think this is a way to do it, focusing on the transportation costs that Representative Bradley outlined.
We estimate that as much as $1 billion we estimate, and these are, going to be disputed, and we're welcome to the discussion, as much as $1 billion a year, is being passed on in transportation costs. That would finance a lot of scrubbers. That would also provide significant real to ratepayers and put a lot of people to work and reduce our CO2 emissions consistent with our clean energy efforts here in Illinois.
Not to mention all that sales tax.
Well, that seems like a win for everybody. We just have to get some very smart people, continue to get them discussing and figure out how to get this done.
Now, speaking of who's against it, there's, I don't know, albeit he seems like an anti-coal guy, period, but it says Illinois has no severance tax on coal, we should be doing that, and more money for mine remediation. And can that be part of the plan, or do you have thoughts on that? That in general, coal is not as bad off as Illinois coal in particular.
Yeah,
as bad off as it appears.
so I'm going to speak for myself on this one, Amanda. I would be open to all of those things. But those things aren't going to happen under the construct that we have today. So again, we're saying let's change how we approach Illinois coal based on something that happened 25 years ago. So we should talk about all of those things as part of a broad discussion. We're focused exclusively right now on addressing unemployment through the greater use of Illinois coal when we know that we don't produce power from our own resource. So, just speaking for myself, I don't speak for anybody that's here today on this issue, but I would be open to all those things. All right. Thank you.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.